each other like, why are we here? Here this IRS has gone through this big, long investigation, and they're prosecuting this guy, but they have all their star witnesses come up on the witness stand, and they can't testify that there was ever any conspiracy, that there's anything false on these tax returns. So it was a big joke. But meanwhile, they indicted me and wanted to try to put me in prison. So basically throwing everything up on the wall and hoping that something stuck, and nothing stuck. Because
well, let me bring this up to you, because you worked for years with the FBI, federal marshals, as a Treasury agent, on these raids, these investigations. I, at my core, now know what the term God-fearing is. But, I mean, my conscience, if I was setting somebody up who was innocent, especially, if I knew somebody was a child killer and I set them up, I would feel bad and wouldn't do it. But setting up innocent people literally sends chills up my spine thinking about it. And I mean, it just sounds like the worst bad luck, to use a term, that I could imagine. I would never do that. And then I see all these cases of people being set up, them trying to set you up. They knew you hadn't done anything. I mean, how do they sleep at night trying to put people in horrible, tuberculosis-filled dungeons for no reason?
Well, I think, Laux, the biggest problem is the hierarchy of these agencies, okay? The actual agents are just working people just like you and me, but they need the job. And meanwhile, the people up the chain of command who are even less accountable are the ones that are willing to do more dirty deeds because they have more to lose, or at least they think they do. They're making, a couple $100,000 a year. They're, big in management. They're getting all kinds of perks. And when they're told to do something, they just do it. And like you mentioned all the time, there's so much compartmentalization in the federal government that those who want to orchestrate from the top can make everyone do their little deed, and it doesn't seem so dirty to the individual agent. But when you put it all together, they're messing with people's lives and their livelihoods and their freedom.
Sure. I mean, how did the Army, and I later learned the guy was with the Army, have somebody, when I'm trying to cover an event in Florida, jump out and start lighting fires to blame me for it? I mean, that shows a level, and I had to, of course, stomp it out and then restrain the person, who then ran off into the night. And Mike Hansen witnessed all of this. It just shows a level of craziness in the elite that is getting more and more. If you look at the criminology, which I know you've studied, an example of like serial killers get more and more reckless because they want to be caught at a subconscious level. That's why criminals brag. But what do you make of the fact that now the choice is getting more and more obvious, where Corzine can steal billions of dollars, lie in front of Congress, be caught red-handed in all his memos and orders and wire transfers, and doesn't get in trouble? Prudential for now 13 years, and a bunch of other insurance companies takes the death benefits of dead troops when they die because they made a deal with the government so they could do it. It's like the government said, we can steal because they're crooks too, as if that makes it okay. And now it's a larger conspiracy. Now we've got Fast and Furious, which if you actually read the federal court cases where this came out, it's government bringing in drugs, it's guns to gangs in the U.S., not just Mexico, gangs in Honduras. I mean, this is a Iran-Contra deal. Now that it's all so obvious, what effect do you think that's having in the federal government? Is that making just the good people leave so that nothing but bad people then will stay? Or what's the process? Is there anything good coming out of this?
Oh, I think a tremendous amount. It's just we're not seeing it. I mean, I've been told that agents that I used to work with, agents around the Bay Area, where I was assigned, I do have a lot of support, but they just don't have the courage to actually speak up about it. And so I think that's at least a step in the right direction. I think also that what you put out is so factual and so real that, it's going to have an effect. It's just you're chipping away, and, eventually it's going to take a while for the dam to break. And the question is, as you've said often, this is a sprint to the finish line between the New World Order and the, good people who just want to be free, and who's going to get there first. And we need law enforcement people to take those risks and risk their life, their sacred honor for these kinds of issues, because literally our own lives are at stake. I mean, when they're poisoning our water, they're poisoning our air. That affects federal agent or non-federal agent just the same. We can all die of cancer and bone maladies and all kinds of things from the same poison. So it's time to wake up and speak up. Do it in a prudential way. Have prudence and don't do things half-cocked. But nevertheless, speak up.
Yeah, that's my biggest problem is I do so much media that I do some half-cocked stuff. And that's my only frustration. And I keep talking about myself because I'm trying to self-analyze and be a better person because of the responsibility I have. It's just that I can feel it and see it all coming to a head. I mean, has Fast and Furious woken up people? Because, I mean, I've seen that really wake people up.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, back, and you, of course, were much more involved in the Waco investigation than I was, but I was still a special agent in the IRS, and we went to see rules of engagement. And I remember going with a few pro-gun friends who still stayed friends with me, even though I was an IRS special agent, and a handful of IRS special agents. We went to the showing of rules of engagement together. So even when I was an agent, I was awake to what was going on and even trying to awaken others. But I know at least one guy in that group who went to see rules of engagement, and he's still up in the upper hierarchy of the IRS CID management. So whatever he saw that day, he's somehow able to dismiss in his mind and still somehow sleep at night.
Well, I'm glad that people are starting to wake up. And what's most important is that people make a choice. And it doesn't mean that everything I say is completely accurate because I make mistakes, or that everything anybody says is completely accurate. But we know that our basic liberties are being trashed. I mean, now in England, which is just a few years ahead of us, they just announced everything is recorded. We're listening to everything. I mean, that's in the news now. They went from denying it to, yeah, we're listening to everything you're doing. Get used to it. We're recording everything. And now they're going, yeah, we're spying on you here. And yeah, the CIA director says the CIA is domestically operating and that there's, built-in devices to spy on you in the new clock radios and dishwashers. So really what I see is the world is getting its choice right now. And the same things that are happening here are happening across the globe. I'm going to take a ton of calls coming up in the next segment and throughout the next hour and get into all this news. But, Joe, I know I'm springing this on you on short notice because I've been meaning to get you on the show. If you can't do it today, maybe later in the week or next week. But are you available to do the nightly news at, say, I know you're a busy guy
No, don't even, Alex. I'd be honored, and I'll get all spoofed up here and get ready to go, and I'll be happy to, and I appreciate you taking my call, and I appreciate all that you do.
Are you kidding? Now, that'll be 12:30. We'll tape that, and then I'll do the news later, but then we usually do the interview early in the day. So 12:30 Pacific's good for you, Joe?
That'd be totally fine, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to make sure, because I know we've got a bunch of numbers, but I want to make sure we've got the accurate number, and I want to make sure we have your Skype ID if you have that for the nightly news. There goes Joe Bannister. Talk about a man of courage going way up the ranks. Treasury Department. Here's a radio show saying the IRS collects for the private Federal Reserve. Didn't believe it, set out to disprove it, found that it was true, spoke out, got arrested. Hello, I'm Alex Jones. See, I intended to take a bunch of calls, and then we get Joe Bannister calling in. But this little segment and the whole next hour, it is going to be phone calls, phone calls, phone calls. In the third hour, I've got a bunch of special news reports I want to go over and analyze, and a lot more. But speaking of lawlessness in government, guys, put that Washington Post back on screen. Radio listeners, if you just type in Homeland Security Department has the lowest morale ever, you will get the Washington Post. And the headline is, low morale at Homeland Security is focus of congressional hearing. And that, of course, is all the agencies that are under Homeland Security. And why do they have low morale? They're getting record pay because they know this country is falling apart, and they know there's corruption going on, and they know people like Corzine and Obama are above the law. Illegal aliens are given waivers. I remember 5 years ago, Bush was doing this, and then Obama continued it. that they would do fake raids on meatpacking plants and stuff just to get the fines on the company and arrest the owners. And then they would take the illegals to a facility and give them green cards on the spot. And in some cases, use them for federal construction projects. And you know the feds aren't getting in trouble using illegals. And again, you cannot have this selective enforcement stuff. Here it is, DHS to grant illegal aliens unlawful presence waivers. Let's go to your phone calls right now. Robin, and then Reverend, and then Sasha, Martin. We'll get to all of you. Robin in Arizona, you're on the air. Welcome.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Could you take my number and have a call?
No, ma'am. I probably am not going to have time to call you back because you called here. Did you want to talk on air?
Yeah, I do, about the Arizona. What do they exactly mean by that? I mean, if you say one word, they can come after you.
Well, that's the kind of crazy stuff. In fact, guys, I had it in yesterday's stack. Will you reprint me? Our article, by the way, got on drudgereport.com. So we got a lot of attention. We appreciate Drudge doing that because it's important, obviously. I wish the media would report on it. Arizona passed a law saying that you can have criminal charges on you of basically stalking and bullying. It's a copy of the cyberbullying legislation that the ADL wants that kills the First Amendment. And it just says cuss words or disparaging remarks. I just mentioned the cuss word part of the bill. It says disparaging remarks. And, of course, I don't like the troll culture on the Internet. It's a culture of cowards that ruin the Internet where they can act like big men and call people names and say I'm a murderer and all this stuff. But that's because they're little cowards. They never come up and say that to my face, okay? So you don't want to let them spoil everybody's First Amendment. And so, yes, ma'am, you can go read the article at Infowars.com. In fact, I'll dig up the headline for you here in a moment. I can't remember the exact headline, and it has a link to the bill. And it's basically the Cyberbullying Act at a state level. There it is. Arizona passes sweeping Internet censorship bill legislation to make it illegal to use offensive language. And so not just cuss words. It goes on in the language to say disparaging. That's what Europe's doing. They say, well, if you've got free speech, but if it hurts someone's feelings, well, now you're going to get arrested. I mean, they actually arrest you in Europe. Canada is now arresting preachers that read anti-homosexual passages. And again, whether you're for that or against it, it's the free speech that's been guaranteed by Magna Carta 1215. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I've been following you for 2 years. I love your show. I've been trying to call you every day for about 2 years. So thanks for getting me today.
Well, thank you. And I wasn't trying to be rude saying I can't call you back. I need to go call my grandma back, and I need to call my wife back. I just have no time. God bless you, ma'am. All right, more calls and a ton of news straight ahead, second hour. All right, into hour number 2. And I'm glad the last caller brought up this article because later I will get into it more. I barely mentioned it yesterday, and I did something that I do a lot, and I apologize for it. Instead of exaggerating what's going on, as people seem to think I do sometimes, and certainly that does happen occasionally, everybody's guilty of hyperbole. Normally, things are worse than I said. And reading over the legislation that Arizona passed, it doesn't just say cuss words. So I've been saying, if you cuss online, they can arrest you. That's not what it is. It's the Cyberbullying Act. It says any offensive language, anything disparaging or hurtful. I mean, just totally unconstitutional. And let me tell you, if the Supreme Court throws out Obamacare, I get a little more hope. They did rule the Second Amendment's an individual right. But it's a battle of ideas. We've got to be out